December 1944. The Ardennes forest stood frozen beneath a snow-heavy sky. Inside a camouflaged M10 Wolverine tank destroyer, Private First Class Ray Thompson watched through a fogged periscope, his breath coming in shallow bursts. 800 yards away, 12 German tanks snaked through the woods, Panzer IVs mostly, and one Tiger I leading the column. Behind them rolled half-tracks with infantry and fuel trucks bringing up the rear. They were heading toward a vital crossroad. If taken, it would cut off the 101st Airborne Division, already encircled at Bastogne. Thompson had no orders to fire. He was told to wait, observe, and report. But he could see what was about to happen. So he made a decision. Without a single command, without clearance, Ray Thompson pulled the trigger. And everything changed. 3 days earlier, Thompson's commanding officer had been clear. No one fires without confirmation from command. I don't care what you see, we do not give away our position unless ordered. The Battle of the Bulge had just begun. On December 16th, under fog and snow, Germany launched its last major Western Front offensive, Operation Watch on the Rhine. Over 200,000 men, more than 1,000 tanks, absolute surprise. American lines buckled, units vanished overnight. In the chaos, commanders feared friendly fire as much as the enemy. So the rule was clear: wait for orders. Thompson and his three-man crew were dug into a ridge near Noville, with good cover and ample range. For days, he scanned terrain through his frosted scope, logging everything in a notebook his mother had mailed him. Tank tracks, bearing, wind speed. He tracked a lone Panzer for nearly an hour once. No orders came. It passed. The anger inside him burned, but discipline held. One wrong shell could mean dead Americans or expose their position to German artillery. But as enemy traffic increased, the question changed. Was holding fire really safer? Thompson studied German columns like a mathematician studies patterns. He knew how they moved, how they relied on tight formations. He knew where to hit them, if the time ever came. He just didn't know yet that he would be the one to decide when. Raymond Charles Thompson grew up in western Kansas, surrounded by gears, grease, and graph paper. His father ran a repair shop. His mother taught 7th grade math. Ray saw the world through angles. He could calculate a grain silo's distance by its shadow. When other kids used slingshots, he built one with pulleys and counterweights. He enlisted in 1942 not for combat, but for engineering training. By the time he reached Normandy at 22, he already looked 5 years older. In the hedgerows, he watched friends burn and vanish. He stopped believing in luck. He started believing in patterns. Thompson carried a spiral notebook, sketching every German vehicle he encountered, noting vulnerabilities and blind spots. Other soldiers called him the quiet clock. When he spoke, it was short, direct, timed to the second. As a gunner, he was deadly. Not flashy, just accurate. What the Army didn't realize was that Ray Thompson was a tactician who saw battlefields like chessboards. And in 3 days, that angle-obsessed brain would rewrite engagement rules in a single burst of firepower. On December 19th, fog clung to the forest like smoke. Through his periscope, Thompson saw the German column. The Tiger I at front, 3 Panzer IVs, 2 half-tracks with infantry, support vehicles, fuel tankers, even a self-propelled anti-aircraft gun at the rear. They expected contact and were prepared for anything except one unapproved American gunner. The road was narrow, hemmed in by steep banks and thick trees. No room to maneuver. To Thompson, it wasn't just a road. It was a trap.
But he had no orders. Radio contact was weak or non-existent. By protocol, he should observe and let artillery handle it. But Thompson wasn't watching a column in transit. He was watching a blade aimed at the American line's throat. That road led directly to Noville. If the Germans took it, they'd flank Bastogne from the north, cutting off the 101st's last supply lifeline. The tanks kept moving forward, confident that American forces were too disorganized to respond. They were half right. Thompson was scared, cold, isolated, but he wasn't disorganized. He was calculating. If he fired too early, they'd scatter. Hit the wrong target, they might escape or overwhelm him with return fire. But if he fired with precision, the right vehicles in the right order, he could dismantle an entire armored column piece by piece. He reached for the elevation dial, took one last look at the formation, and waited for the moment no manual had prepared him for. Ray Thompson had never fired without orders. But now, staring at the exposed column, he realized waiting was no longer caution. Waiting was suicide. With no radio contact, no green light, no backup, he adjusted the angle, held his breath, and fired. But he didn't aim for the lead tank. He aimed for the third. The armor-piercing round struck the Panzer IV directly in the flank. Fire and black smoke erupted. The entire column halted. Thompson shifted position, 5 yards left, and fired again at the sixth vehicle. The half-track's fuel tank ignited instantly, bodies thrown into trees, fire spreading to underbrush. The Germans panicked. The Tiger tried reversing, but the formation was packed too tight. Thompson reloaded. He fired at the eighth vehicle, a fuel truck. The explosion rocked the hillside, flames jetting skyward, the blast knocking infantrymen down. The shot order wasn't random. Thompson had studied German doctrine for months. By hitting the third vehicle, he created a physical block. The sixth jammed the middle. The eighth crippled their retreat and ignited chaos. It was surgical disruption. Each shot a scalpel, not a hammer. Germans fired wildly into trees, unsure where fire came from. To them, it felt like an ambush by an entire battery. But there was no battery, just Ray Thompson and a crew who stopped asking questions. The Ardennes screamed. Trees cracked under shock waves. Snow, fire, and shrapnel filled the air. The Tiger was stuck, trapped between flaming wreckage and vehicles that couldn't move. Their tight, disciplined formation had become a steel coffin. German infantry scattered into woods. One officer climbed atop a tank for a better view and was cut down by Thompson's machine gun. The M10 crew sweated from exertion, blistered hands, hoarse voices, the smell of hot metal and cordite. But Thompson was ice. Every shot came from calculation, not adrenaline. He repositioned after every 2 shells, 10 yards here, 20 there, making German gunners doubt their aim. The smoke, fog, and terrain helped, but the real advantage, they thought there were more of him. Germans believed they'd stumbled into a multi-unit ambush. Some guessed 4 tanks, others 8. There were reports of artillery batteries, though none existed in that sector. The truth? 1 M10 with 3 men and a gunner who was supposed to be following orders. By 30 minutes, the road was clogged with burning steel. 5 vehicles destroyed, 3 immobilized. Survivors from the rear had fled. The Tiger finally pivoted its turret toward Thompson's last position. He didn't flinch. He waited for the exact moment when the hull exposed its flank during repositioning. The shell struck home. Internal ammunition cooked off. The turret launched upward in a plume of fire, landing yards away. The blast was so violent that it knocked the anti-aircraft gun off balance. Its gunners dropped weapons and ran. One crewman looked at Thompson. "Are we still going to get court-martialed for this?" Thompson didn't answer. He just loaded another round.
Hours later, under interrogation, a captured German lieutenant struggled to speak. "There were many guns, maybe 6, maybe more. We were attacked by a full battery." American intelligence officers exchanged glances. There hadn't been a battery, just 1 M10 and a gunner who'd never received permission to fire. Other prisoners told different stories. Paratroopers with anti-tank weapons, planted mines, muzzle flashes from 3 angles. In their confusion, Germans invented enemies that didn't exist. Fear filled the blanks. They simply couldn't believe one man had done that. They were right to doubt. This hadn't been brute force. This was surgical disruption, following logic no German unit had prepared for. German doctrine assumed Americans were slow to respond, overly reliant on orders. But Thompson thought like a German commander, then struck like a ghost. One prisoner described it as, if the threes had opened fire. When American forces moved in to clear the road, what they found stunned even veterans. Wreckage looked like an airstrike's aftermath. Vehicles stacked like dominoes, frozen corpses, splintered trees. But above all, the absence of American dead, because there had only been one gunner. Survivors would refer to it by a single phrase, the Geisterbatterie, the ghost battery. For 48 hours, Thompson expected arrest. After the shooting stopped, he sat motionless inside the M10. Adrenaline drained. Dread arrived. They had disobeyed direct orders. His commanding officer, Captain Langston, read Thompson's report without speaking. Sketches, range estimates, firing sequence diagrams. "You know," Langston finally said, "if this had gone wrong, if even one was friendly fire." Thompson nodded. "I knew what I saw." "No one authorized this, Thompson." "I do." Langston exhaled. "Go get some rest. I've got to send this upstairs." Thompson waited for punishment, but scouts from the 101st Airborne arrived first. They'd expected the forest road crawling with armor. Instead, twisted German wreckage. When asked which unit did this, Langston said it wasn't a unit. It was one gunner. Word spread. The guy from Kansas who took out a Panzer column alone. Division intelligence reviewed Thompson's notes, interviewed his crew. They couldn't prove disobedience. Radio lines had been jammed. What they could confirm, 7 vehicles destroyed, 4 disabled, 0 American casualties, 1 strategic objective held, 1 supply corridor kept open. Thompson didn't receive a medal, but he wasn't court-martialed either. He was quietly assigned to train other gunners on firing pattern theory. His diagrams were sent to Fort Sill Artillery School. They hadn't just forgiven what he did, they were studying it. Weeks later, Langston approached him. "I was ready to report you for insubordination, but then I read that line in your notebook, controlled collapse. What did you mean?" Thompson wiped his hands. "When you pull one stone from the wall, the rest falls if you know where to pull." Langston smiled. "Next time you knock down a wall, give me warning." Thompson just nodded. To him, it wasn't victory. It was a solution, a calculation, a necessity. He'd made peace with the fact it could have gone the other way. But war doesn't always punish disobedience. Sometimes it learns from it.
After the war, Thompson went home to Kansas, married Helen, started a repair shop near Dodge City. He fixed tractors, built grain silos, taught his son geometry by marking angles in dirt with a stick. He never called himself a hero. But years later, the Army quietly began teaching asymmetrical engagement sequencing, a fancy term for a simple idea. Don't aim for the front, aim for the collapse. The case study, a single engagement outside Noville, Belgium. Grainy maps, wreckage patterns, firing trajectories. No names given, but students at Fort Sill studied it because it worked, because it saved lives, because it changed understanding of what one gunner could do. A colonel later summarized it. He didn't break orders, he operated beyond them. The ultimate paradox, a man who disobeyed the chain of command became the model for flexible battlefield thinking. His technique was integrated into Cold War doctrine for disabling Soviet armored columns, create artificial choke points through selective targeting, exploit enemy formation discipline against them. Revolutionary, from a Kansas farm kid who never attended college. Decades later, a historian tracked down Thompson in his 80s. Asked about that day, Thompson took a long time to answer. "I remember the trees,
how still it was before the first shot, like the world was holding its breath. Asked why he didn't wait for orders? Because by the time the radio worked, it would have been too late. He paused. I didn't break the rules. I just stepped past them for a minute, long enough to do what had to be done. Ray Thompson didn't win the war, but he saved a road, saved paratroopers, saved a moment. And in war, sometimes that's everything. He reminded the Army that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it calculates, and sometimes it pulls the trigger, not out of defiance, but out of deeper duty. One gunner, one decision, one pattern, an entire German column brought to its knees,